John used to think life had a rhythm, like the waves of the sea he loved. Every morning, he and Lena would walk along the shore, their hands intertwined, laughing at small things. A gull flying too close, the way the wind tangled their hair, or the sun painting the clouds in colors they could never name. Life felt endless, simple, perfect. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Lena had climbed to fix the old roof of their small seaside house. John had warned her, had shouted, had told her to wait. But in a single, terrible moment she slipped. He never saw the fall. All he remembered was her scream and the sickening sound of impact. The days after her death were a blur. John barely slept. The house felt hollow, empty, filled only with echoes of her laughter. He would sit by the window, staring at the horizon, imagining her there, smiling, telling him it was okay. But every time he turned, there was nothing. Just silence. He started walking to the sea every morning. The sand was cold beneath his bare feet, the wind whipping against his face. Sometimes he spoke aloud, telling her about the day, about the little things that happened in town, about the meals he ate alone. The waves responded, curling and hissing as if they understood. The neighbors whispered about him. "He's lost his mind," they said. His family tried to reach him, tried to pull him back to life on land. They begged him to eat, to sleep, to leave the shore. John would nod politely, smile faintly, and go back to the sea the next day. Each day he remembered her more vividly. Her hair in the sun, the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the smell of jasmine she wore. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, he swore he could hear her whisper his name, soft and close. One evening, after weeks of walking alone, he stayed until the sky turned deep purple. The water shimmered with the last light of the sun, and John closed his eyes, letting the sound of the waves fill the emptiness in his chest. He could almost feel her hand brushing his, almost hear her laughter carried on the tide. He did not know then that the sea had begun to answer him. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, when John walked along the familiar shoreline. The sand was soft under his bare feet, and the gentle wind carried the salty scent of the sea, mingled with something faintly sweet, a smell that made his heart ache and skip at the same time. He paused, squinting at the waves, feeling the tug of the water as though it were alive, calling to him. And then he saw her. At first he thought it must be a trick of the light, a shadow of his grief playing cruel games. There, rising slowly from the gentle swell of the waves, was Lena. Her dark hair flowed like silk on the surface of the water, catching the last rays of sunlight, her eyes shimmering with a strange, unearthly glow. She smiled, that same smile that had warmed him through so many ordinary days. "John." Her voice floated across the water, soft and melodic, like a song he had forgotten but could still hum in his memory. "You've come." He froze. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. "Lena, is it really you?" His voice trembled, caught somewhere between hope and disbelief. She reached out her hand, and he didn't hesitate. He felt the cold touch of her fingers, but it brought him a warmth he could not explain. "I never left," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." John sank to his knees on the wet sand, overwhelmed by emotion. I thought I lost you," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I thought the world took you from me forever." Lena knelt beside him, brushing a damp strand of hair from his face. "I am here now," she said simply, "and I will stay. The sea has brought me back to you." From that evening onward, John returned to the shore every day, waiting for her arrival. Some days, she appeared with the first light of dawn, her hair floating like dark clouds on the water. Other days, she rose from the waves only at sunset, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. They would sit together on the rocks, talking for hours. She told him stories of the deep ocean, of glowing fish that danced in the darkness, of coral palaces that shimmered like glass, and of secret songs that only the sea could carry. John listened, enraptured, feeling as if he had stepped into a world beyond human comprehension. Sometimes she would laugh, a sound so sweet and musical that it filled the empty spaces in his heart. John found himself laughing too, almost forgetting the ache that had haunted him since her death. The waves lapped gently at their feet, as though they too recognized her presence, as though the sea itself was alive with magic. Every evening he would leave small gifts for her on the shore, a scarf she had once worn, a seashell glinting with rainbow colors, a single wildflower he picked from the cliffs. Every gift was met with her smile, the soft glimmer of recognition in her eyes. She would bend gracefully to pick them up, her fingers brushing the wet sand, and John would feel a surge of joy and relief. She was really here. She had really returned. But life on land began to notice his absence. His neighbors whispered among themselves. Friends who had once called found only silence. His family tried to reach him, but John paid little attention to their words. "You don't understand," he would say quietly, almost to himself. "She is here. She is waiting. She has returned for me." Nights were the hardest. When the town went quiet and the stars reflected on the calm sea, John would sit by the water, talking softly to Lena. He told her about the day, about things too small to matter to anyone else, about the meals he had eaten alone and the books he had tried to read but could not finish. Lena would listen, leaning close, her hair drifting in the tide, and answer in whispers that seemed to come from the very heart of the ocean. One evening, as a storm began far out at sea, the waves rising and crashing against the shore, Lena's voice carried over the wind. "Come closer," she called. John stepped carefully into the water, the cold waves reaching his knees, and felt her hand wrap around his. The storm seemed to fade around them, as if the world outside the circle of their presence had ceased to exist. For hours they stood together, talking, laughing, and holding each other, until the sky cleared and stars blinked above, reflecting in the water like a mirror of light. John walked home that night with sand between his toes and salt in his hair, a smile he had not felt in months stretching across his face. For the first time since Lena's fall, he felt hope. The sea had returned her to him, and he just knew, that he would never be alone again. And yet, deep in his chest, a quiet ache remained, a whisper of warning that the world he had known might never again recognize the man who belonged to the sea. But John did not care. All that mattered was her smile, her touch, her presence beside him in the waves. From that day forward, the sea became John's world, and Lena its heartbeat. Every morning, long before the sun rose over the horizon, he would slip quietly out of the small house he no longer cared for and walk barefoot along the shore. The sand was always cold, damp with night dew, and the wind carried the tang of salt and the faint scent of wildflowers that grew along the cliffs. Sometimes it felt as though the entire world had been swallowed by the waves, leaving only him and her, waiting just beyond the tide. Lena appeared without fail. Sometimes she rose with the first touch of dawn, hair flowing like black silk across the water's surface, eyes glinting with an unearthly light. Other times, she waited until the sky burned with gold and crimson, drifting over the waves like a shadow of the sun. John would call to her, and her voice, soft and melodic, would carry across the sand, filling him with a mixture of awe and relief. Each meeting followed a rhythm of its own. He would walk into the shallow waves, careful to keep his footing on the shifting sand, and she would glide toward him, smiling. Often, They would sit on the rocks near the edge of the shore, the water curling around them, and talk for hours. Lena told him of the deep ocean, of the hidden grottos where sunlight never touched, of coral castles glittering with colors beyond imagination, and of fish that glowed in the dark, swimming in endless patterns. He listened, enraptured, feeling the weight of grief lift a little each day. John began leaving small offerings for her. A scarf she had loved, folded neatly and placed on a rock. A wildflower plucked from the cliffside. A seashell that caught the light like a tiny rainbow. When she accepted them, bending gracefully to pick them up, he felt a surge of warmth in his chest. It was as if the sea itself had acknowledged her return. He began to talk to her even when she had not yet appeared, describing the simple details of his day. The bread he had eaten for breakfast, the gull that had flown too close, the letter from a neighbor asking after him. Lena would appear, listening intently, answering in her soft, flowing voice that seemed carried on the waves themselves. John's life on land began to fade. He stopped answering the phone, ignored the letters and knocks at the door. His family grew concerned. "John, you can't live like this," they said. She's gone. You need to eat, to sleep, to live." But John only shook his head gently. "You don't understand," he murmured. "She is here. She has returned. I will not leave her." Days melted into weeks. He would rise before dawn, walk along the beach, wait for her, and return only when the last light of evening had disappeared into the horizon. At night, he lay on the sand or in the shallow waves, staring at the stars reflected in the dark water, feeling her presence even when she was not visible. Sometimes a gentle brush of water across his arm, a whisper of wind in his hair, made him smile and believe she had been there, watching over him. Neighbors whispered. Children playing near the cliffs would point at him and ask why he talked to the waves. Shopkeepers muttered about the man who lost his mind to the sea. But John never heard them. The only sound that mattered was Lena's voice, her laughter, the soft movement of her hand through the water. Their moments together grew more intimate. Lena would float near him, hair drifting around them, telling stories of a world beneath the waves, a kingdom of shimmering colors, singing shells, and creatures that glowed like living stars. John would imagine himself swimming with her into that world, exploring the secret depths of the ocean where no one else could follow. Every story made the waves seem brighter, the air sweeter, the sand warmer beneath his feet. John sometimes remembered life on land, but it seemed distant, unreal. He had no desire to return to it. Meals, chores, even the company of his family felt hollow compared to the warmth he found in her presence. He began to dream aloud of the day they might walk together into the deep, where the sea could hold them forever. Lena would smile, her eyes reflecting the glimmer of distant waves, and say nothing. But John felt her agreement in every motion of the water, in every gentle ripple that touched his skin. And so his days passed, in a quiet rhythm of longing and joy, of whispered conversations and gentle laughter, of walks along the sand and hours spent leaning against rocks while the tide curled around them. The world beyond the beach became smaller with each passing day, until the only reality John knew was the one in which Lena waited for him, smiling, shimmering, and alive in the sea that had claimed his heart. Even in the quiet moments when he felt the ache of grief rise again, he would close his eyes and imagine her hand brushing his cheek, her laugh carried across the tide, the sun glinting off her hair. For the first time since her death, John believed completely that he had found her again, and every morning, as the horizon glowed with the first light, he would rise with a smile, knowing she would be there, waiting for him, as real as the waves beneath his feet. The world beyond the shore had faded entirely for John. Each morning he rose with the tide, his bare feet pressing into cold, damp sand, every step toward the water filled with anticipation and relief. The horizon glimmered with pale light before the sun even rose, and often, even in the dim early hours, he could hear her. Lena's voice, soft and melodious, carried across the waves. "John, I've been waiting." And there she was. She glided over the water, hair floating like dark silk, eyes catching the faint glow of dawn, as if the sun itself had been trapped in her gaze. Her smile, that same smile that had warmed him through countless ordinary days, made his chest tighten with longing. He ran toward her, arms trembling, heart hammering with a mix of joy and disbelief. He grasped her hand, feeling the chill of the water, yet warmth bloomed inside him that he could not explain. For those moments, the world outside the waves did not exist. There was only Lena, only the water, only the quiet rhythm of her presence. Their days soon took on a rhythm that belonged entirely to the shore. They walked along the cliffs where wildflowers grew, tangled among stones and rocks, hands intertwined, laughing together as if the months of grief had never happened. Lena told him stories of the deep, of places no human eye had ever seen. Grottos glowing with sunlight trapped in crystal, coral palaces shimmering with colors beyond imagination, and schools of fish that glowed like living stars. John listened, wide-eyed and mesmerized, feeling the weight of sorrow ease from his chest with every word. The world beneath the waves felt as real to him as the sand beneath his feet. Every detail of Lena's presence enchanted him, the way her hair floated in the water, the delicate way her fingers brushed the surface, the shimmer of her eyes in sunlight and moonlight alike. Each moment was a miracle. He began leaving gifts for her on the shore. Scarves, seashells, flowers pressed from the cliffs, small sculptures carved from driftwood. Lena accepted each one with a gentle smile, bending gracefully to pick them up, her eyes shining in recognition. When she laughed at his clumsy attempts, John felt a thrill of joy that made him laugh too, forgetting for a time the aching absence that had once defined his life. But the world beyond the waves did not forget him. His family grew increasingly worried, sending letters and knocking at the door, but John ignored them. Friends who once laughed with him on long summer nights went silent. Neighbors whispered about him, the man who had been claimed by the sea. Children playing near the cliffs would point at him, asking why he spoke to the waves. Shopkeepers muttered about the man who had lost himself entirely. John ignored it all. His only concern was Lena. Every morning he rose before the sun, walked along the wet sand, waded into the shallow waves, and felt the pull of her hand in his. He no longer noticed the hunger or fatigue that gnawed at his body, no longer thought of meals or warmth of home. Everything that once mattered had been replaced by the rhythm of their shared days, the sound of her laughter, the glimmer of her hair in the sunlight, and the stories of the deep that she whispered. Their bond grew with each passing day. Lena would sometimes float just beyond the surf, teasing him with glimpses of the hidden world beneath the waves. "Come with me," she would say, her voice soft and irresistible. "There is more to see, more to share, more to love." John felt a thrill of longing at the words, imagining a hidden world below, a place where they could be together forever. Each day he imagined himself swimming beside her, exploring the sunken grottos and coral palaces she described, diving into a kingdom of light and color that no one else could ever reach. Evenings were a time of quiet wonder. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon with reds and golds, and John would wade into the water, holding her hand, feeling the waves curl around them. He listened to her stories of the sea, of creatures that danced in the deep, singing shells, and silent, glowing kingdoms. He imagined them swimming together, disappearing into the vast depths, moving in perfect harmony, untouched by the world above. At those moments, grief and loneliness felt like distant memories. Nights, however, were bittersweet. When the town went quiet and the stars reflected in the calm water, John lay on the sand or in the shallow waves, arms wrapped around himself, imagining Lena's hand resting on his shoulder, her whispers in the wind. I am here, always here. Sometimes he imagined her floating above him, her hair drifting like ink across the surface, eyes glimmering with light only he could see. It was a comfort, but also a deep, aching reminder that she belonged to a world he could not touch, except in fleeting, precious moments. John began to lose sense of time. Days and nights blurred together. He did not notice how his hair grew long and tangled, how his skin darkened from sun and salt, or how his eyes became fixed on the horizon. He had no desire to return to life on land. Meals, chores, conversations, even the comfort of family and friends felt hollow compared to the warmth he found in her presence. He dreamed aloud of swimming with her into the depths, exploring the hidden kingdoms she described. Lena would smile but remain silent, and John felt the affirmation of her presence in every ripple, every movement of the tide, every shimmer of light across the water. Weeks became months. John's love and obsession grew inseparable. The beach became a world unto itself, a sanctuary of waves, sand, and the glowing presence of Lena. He could no longer distinguish between reality and the moments he imagined beneath the surface. The isolation that might have terrified a man on land brought him peace. No one else existed there. No one else mattered. His heart beat only for Lena, and the sea seemed to breathe with them, alive and protective of their bond. Then one morning the horizon was calm, the waves gentle, the sky painted with soft pinks and golds. Lena appeared earlier than usual, floating just beyond the shallow waves. Her eyes sparkled, brighter than ever. She extended her hand toward him, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. John, today, come with me. There is a place beneath the waves where we can be together forever. John's heart leaped. He knew what she meant. He had imagined this day countless times, the day he would follow her into the depths, leaving the world behind, leaving nothing but the sea and Lena. Every step he had taken, every gift, every laugh, every whispered story had led to this moment. He did not hesitate. Hand in hand, they walked into the water. The cool waves lapped over his ankles, then knees, then waist, as Lena guided him gently deeper. The world above began to fade, the cliffs, the sand, the town, even the sunlight. It was replaced by the soft, endless blue, by the quiet pulse of the ocean, by Lena's serene presence beside him. She smiled, brushing her hair back as the current wrapped around them. We are free now, she said. John's chest swelled with joy and longing. He felt weightless, as if the sea had lifted every burden he had carried since her fall, since her death. For the first time, he believed they were truly together again. The water rose higher, curling around his chest. He laughed softly, a sound mingling relief, love, and awe. Lena's hand tightened around his, guiding him further into the unknown, deeper than he had ever imagined. The sunlight dimmed, replaced by the soft, luminous glow she had described in her stories: coral castles, dancing fish, silent kingdoms. John breathed slowly, savoring every heartbeat, every shimmer of light, every gentle brush of Lena's hand. I'm here. Always, she whispered. We will never be apart. And then, the water enveloped them completely. The last sound he heard was her laughter, soft and echoing, mingling with the gentle rhythm of the sea. A calm, infinite blue surrounded him, and the world above, the town, his family, the life he had known, slipped away entirely. The waves closed over him, carrying him into the depths, into the hidden kingdom Lena had promised, where love and longing existed beyond time, beyond pain, and beyond the reach of the world above. John was gone. The sea remained calm, the tide gentle on the shore, and in the quiet, there was only the faint shimmer of light far below, a trace of the love that had once walked along the sand, hand in hand, with the woman who had returned from the waves.